Article 121. It talks about restriction on discussion in Parliament. We all know that in Article 19 of the Constitution, all citizens have some kind of freedom of speech. But there can be some kind of restrictions on that freedom of speech. For example, no immoral or indecent or defamatory things can be said by people. But there is no such restriction on members of parliament. Members of parliament can discuss on anything without any restriction whatsoever. Even the restrictions that are mentioned in Article 19 on freedom of speech, those restrictions will not apply for any discussion in parliament of speech. But only one restriction is applied, and that restriction is mentioned in Article 121. It says, no discussion shall take place in Parliament with respect to the conduct of any judge of the Supreme Court or of a High Court in the discharge of his duties, except upon a motion for presenting an address to the President praying for the removal of the judge as hereinafter provided. Basically, this part says nothing in the Parliament. Like, for example, it talks about both Supreme Court and High Court judge. No one in Parliament can say a Supreme Court judge X or High Court judge Y had did something wrong as a judge. I mean, while discharging of his duties, no one can say that. That means basically Parliament, which is the legislature, cannot interfere with the activities of the judiciary. This is called separation of powers. And Article 122, which we will see later, talks about how judiciary cannot interfere with Parliament. That is another thing. And these two things, Article 121 and 122, talk about separation of powers between legislature and judiciary. Legislature being Parliament, judiciary being Supreme Court and High Court. That's what it talks about. And it also talks about, and these two articles 121 and 122 also impose some kind of checks and balance, so that both the branches of the government, like judiciary and legislature and executive, are separate. Like, none of these three branches, basically judiciary is independent from the other two, legislature and executive, and the other way around. That's what these two talk about. But with one small exception. Let's say, what if some judge needs to be removed? Only in that case, any person can talk about any Supreme Court judge, High Court judge, or a High Court judge. That will be discussed in Article number 124. Article number 124 talks about the process of removal of Supreme Court or High Court judge. Yeah, and only in that case it can be discussed, not in any other case. That's what Article number 121 talks about.